Hello there, my friend, and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up, where I am welcoming two excellent guests, including comedian and the greatest Trump impersonator and podcaster in the world, J.L. Cauvin, joins me today. Very excited to have him back on the show. And before that, I've got a best-selling author, someone who I interviewed years ago, made a huge impact on me with his first book, To Be a Friend is Fatal, which is about refugee resettlement from the Iraq War, where he was working for the U.S. government at USAID. It's never left me, that book. Really important, very important. Since then, he's written The Feather Thief, and now his new book is out, and it's so good, The Fisherman and the Dragon, which is a gripping account of a small town set on fire by hatred, xenophobia, and ecological disaster. It's a story that weaves together corporate malfeasance, a battle over shrinking natural resources, a turning point in the modern white supremacist movement, and one woman's relentless battle for environmental justice. Kirk Wallace Johnson joins me on today's show. Very excited to have both of these guys on. And last night, we did a Stand Up with Pete Dominick subscriber-only hangout, which we do every Thursday night at 8 East. Had a lot of fun. And I made a little announcement on last night's first to those of you who joined the hangout, and I want to share that announcement and subsequent fake press conference with you now. This is from our hangout with subscribers, listeners last night. This is what you missed as well, and also why I was a little late today. All right, folks, so after 660 or some shows, I've never actually taken a full week off in the almost 3 years I've done this. I've taken some time off, but I almost always worked during that time to post shows. And I decided I got to do this because it's the end of the summer. The girls are both finally going to be home. There's a lot of things I want to work on and get done, and I've just not been able to do this. It's kind of obsessive of me. It's ridiculous. Obviously, it's because I'm worried that I will lose listeners and the opportunity to gain listeners. And this is my job. I want this to be my job. I want to keep growing this podcast. And so I worry that you're going to find another lover while I take some time off. Somebody that you love more than me. You'll never come back. And it's ridiculous because my closest friends and many listeners and friends have said, come on, Colbert takes time off. Every media person, anchor, news person, whatever you want to call yourself, everybody does that. And I say, well, they work in corporate media. They play reruns. And anyway, I'm just not going to post anything. I'm just going to go silent. I'm going to try to read and meditate and be with my family. But I'm terrified of it. I might even want to take 2 weeks off here at the end of the summer before my daughter, freshman and senior, and maybe I'll be able to hang out with them. And anyway, I know there's probably a lot of questions, and that's because I asked you before I hit record to ask me some questions. So I will take just a couple questions, and then we can get to the show. First of all, the look on Karen Madison's face is really not in like. It doesn't make me feel good. You seem upset that we're even doing this press conference, Karen.
So I caught a hint of something in the morning email. Like you were like, I'm worried or something. And I got a little busy, but I was going to text you this meme that says, you can't make everyone happy. You're not Botox. Like, take some fucking days off. Like my $15 or $20, I don't even know what I give you. My $20 doesn't entitle me to full-on access for you all the time. Take some time.
No, that's a $30 fee.
I don't give you $30. I know my cheap ass don't give you $30.
No, I'm saying I don't know if you've heard, but the people who pay $30 get one night of camping. So,
well, I'm definitely going to take it down to 10 now. I don't want it.
The opposite. Francis.
Do you not think you're our side piece?
Thank you for that truth. Who is your primary again? Is it Pod Saves?
JL. Is it JL? I like to hear him self-deprecate. So
there you go.
Well, you'll be happy.
I come to you for just to just walk the palate. You're a palate cleanser.
Thank you,
Francis. We come to him because he puts us on an episode every so often.
Yeah,
so we have to keep string them along.
We got to give you a little something.
Benny, we question from Benny. Thank you, Benny.
Yeah, Pete. As a Patreon subscriber, if you're taking a week off, does that mean we get like $1.25 back this month?
Yeah, see, that's what I'm worried about. That's what I'm worried about. People requesting, and then I've got there's a lot of work there with getting that, the money back to you. There's a lot, but I will, if anybody requests, I guess, I'll just ignore those emails. Joby.
Oh, yes, Pete. I was just wondering, once you're done with this time off, have you ever thought about maybe starting a podcast or something?
Oh, that's not fair. That doesn't seem right. I am a white man with a podcast, and it's daily. I'll have you know. All right, well, are there any other questions about Brady, you had a question?
You and I went back and forth on email a couple of weeks ago about taking vacation. You've taken some time off in the last couple of years, but you haven't taken enough time off without doing some sort of work. We all kind of are guilty of that. Like, I'm going to take vacation, but I'm going to spend 1 hour a morning on email. So you really need to just cut it off in 4 weeks or 2 weeks. Here's what I would challenge you to do. Give us your top 3 podcasts that you want us to listen to in your absence.
Of my episodes, obviously, because I don't want you to listen to anybody else.
Let me introduce you to your mistress.
Yeah. Tell us whose podcast we should use. We should sub into.
I will tell you.
I'm going to tell you who to cheat on me with.
10
stupid, Brady.
10% happier with Dan Harris is my favorite thing to listen to. Vicky.
So I need a sense of reality right now, Pete. Are you actually going to get hair plugs?
It's a lot of people take time off and they get some kind of cosmetic thing done.
They get work done.
Yeah.
Liposuction and cap.
I am getting a penis reduction, if you must know. If you must know.
You're not black. You don't need that.
And strangely, a balls enhancement. So, yeah. Sorry. You asked.
Time to reverse the vasectomy?
Yeah. I'm getting my vasectomy reversed because I want more kids. That's right.
Good one.
That's right.
Way to go, Gareth.
Is that a thing? All right. Well,
yes.
Thank you all for coming to today's press conference. And now I'd like to turn it over to Merrick Garland.
Yeah, right on.
All right, well, there you have it. That's the announcement. I am planning to take next weekend, maybe the week after, off to be with my family, who are all home for the first time all summer long, and also plan on getting some work done in terms of being creative about what's next here with the show. It's been cruise control since I killed the news segment. I'm really proud of the guests I've been having, the conversations I've been having, the preparation I've been doing for them. But I want to add some features, some regular features to the podcast, keep you coming back here on a daily basis if it's not enough just to interview 2 brilliant people every day. And that is the value of the podcast, I think, that I have access to these folks. They say yes, and I work really hard to do a good interview with them. That's what you're paying for. So sign up now, be a part of the community, the Hangouts, the Discord chat, my friend, hopefully, standupwithpete.com right now, everybody. Okay, now let's get to my guests, shall we? Like I said, great conversation with JL Cauvin coming up. You're not going to want to miss that. A lot of fun. I love his analysis. As always, he makes a tremendous amount of sense, to me at least, and I think you're going to love it. But first, my conversation with Kirk Wallace Johnson. I just told you a little bit about the book that he's written, The Fisherman and the Dragon. You might think, hey, I'm not sure if I'm going to be interested in this conversation. This is a good one. I promise you that. I'm really happy about it, proud of it. Kirk is on Twitter, by the way, at Kirk W. Johnson, and KirkWJohnson.com is his website. Ladies and gentlemen, Kirk Wallace Johnson. And now here he is, and I'm very excited and honored to have him here on this show. The Fisherman and the Dragon, Fear, Greed, and a Fight for Justice on the Gulf Coast. Kirk Wallace Johnson, congratulations. You're a best-selling author already, and I'm sure you're going to be again, and I'm very impressed. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I will not forget our first conversation or your first book or the life that led to that and Iraq, the war, and USAID, I never stopped thinking about how much you humanized refugees and interpreters that were working with the U.S. military, and how we've seen that problem play out over and over. But you were the first journalist and writer, I thought, that really exposed all that and how important it was. And I think about you often because of it. And I just, over the years, I wanted to mention that I think about you. It was really important to me, that work.
Thank you for that.
This is as well, because this is a story I had no idea about. Where do we start? Your new book, it takes place on the Gulf Coast in Texas, in a town most people haven't heard of. It has to deal with what we aren't calling refugees necessarily anymore, but we did. We used to even call them boat people from Vietnam, and it has to do with the Klan. It has to do with corporate greed and industry and just economics in general. But what a story with so many rich characters, many of which you interviewed. How do you set this up in an interview like ours right now?
Yeah, it's in some ways it's a challenge because there's just so much going on in this book. But at the heart, this is about a clash between Vietnamese refugees who were resettled here after the fall of Saigon, who were trying to rebuild their lives as fishermen in Texas along the Gulf Coast. And at first, the white fishermen were quite happy to have them there because they unloaded all these crappy boats on them for 5 or 10 times their true value, kind of playing them for suckers. But the Vietnamese did everything right. They fixed these boats up. They used their family members as deckhands. They ate the fish that white people consider junk fish to cut down on costs. They loaned each other money when bankers wouldn't give them lines of credit. And within a few years, they became so effective at shrimping and crabbing that the whites freaked out. And again, we're talking about the late 1970s here, early dawn of the 1980s. And they ran to the Texas governor and they said, we want a ban on refugees. And when that failed, the Ku Klux Klan then entered the fight. And what ensued, and this is really what's at the heart of the book, was a kind of insane and ghastly campaign of violence and harassment by the Klan, but also by white people who, to this day, denied that they were part of the Klan, to try to turn these Vietnamese into refugees once again. And so Vietnamese boats were burnt, homes were burnt, the Klan patrolled the bay and with heavily armed and robed Klansmen. It's an insane story.
Vietnamese people forced from their own country, those many of which who fought on the side of Americans. You tell the story about their resettlement here in the U.S., and then they come back. This is the craziest thing about the story, and it might be the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life, that they come here and they're fighting against Americans who fought in Vietnam. And I don't want to say that they fought necessarily against each other in one country and then were fighting against each other in a new country, because it's likely the Americans were fighting on the side of those who left the country. But nonetheless, the Vietnamese people against the American people are with them. And then they come to Texas in the U.S., and they're maybe fighting or with the same people again. And as you said, maybe becoming again refugees, forced out of the second home that they've had, thinking that they had the second chance. It's crazy. Tell me who some of the characters are.
Yeah, it's still shocking to me, but I always feel like I need to just remind folks that nobody wants to become a refugee. You wouldn't want to become a refugee. None of your listeners would. But we've got these kind of silly myths that anyone who comes here must be coming here to steal something from us, to steal a job from us or anything. But the Vietnamese, they would have given anything to have stayed at home. Many of these people, the Colonel Nguyen Van Nam, he fought for 22 years, took a bunch of bullets. He received special forces training here in the United States. He could have stayed here if he really wanted to be here. But no, he kept returning to the fight. But when this country vanished, they fled. And Americans didn't want to let them in here. But President Ford basically ignored all the polls and he said, I don't care. We're opening our doors up to these people. And so a lot of them, Houston and the Texas coast became like the second largest concentration of Vietnamese refugees after Southern California.
Kirk, where was Senator Joe Biden on Vietnamese refugees?
He was just newly elected senator. And I mean, I think it's his first even months in office. And when President Ford said, we're going to open our doors up, Congress quickly mobilized to give about $300 or $400 million and create something called the Indo-Chinese Refugee Migration Act to resettle these people. And Biden was, I mean, you can read the White House transcripts from back then, but he was fighting this. He didn't want them to come in at first. He didn't want to spend the money. You know, those of us who have known Biden and his track record, and I have a very public, you know, I took on Biden very aggressively and publicly last year as Kabul was falling, but we've all known that Biden has never been a great friend of refugees. So, you know, they basically ended up here. They did everything we could hope for from a newly resettled community, and their reward for that was being, you know, threatened with violence and chased around by the Klan.
Really important background in the history there. And so the other player here, before I drill down, is industry, petrochemical industry. Anybody who knows a little bit about Texas knows about a lot more probably than I do about that industry. What role is the environmental disaster and that industry play here?
You know, that when I first started investigating this story, I was thinking about it as a turf war, even though it was a sort of one-sided war. It was the whites that were trying to fight. But I eventually realized that no one was paying any attention to the turf itself. And this is the heart of the petrochemical industry, oil being discovered in Texas. I mean, half of all the chemicals in the country were being produced just around Galveston Bay. Over the course of the 20th century, more and more of these plants kept popping up and sort of metastasizing along the Gulf Coast. And it's not just the plants it's not like in the process of getting approved, Texas senators and these bigwigs are giving away tax abatements, concessions to these companies to pick Texas for these plants. But they're also impounding the fresh water from the rivers that used to go into these bays and giving them to the plants along with permits to discharge that now fouled up water with all kinds of toxic stuff in it into the bays. And so over decades and decades of accidents and spills and some just deliberate dumping, the bays got poisoned and people started pulling up mutated crab and shrimp and all of this. And it was in that context of a rapid realization that things were going south in the fishing of shrimp and crab that the Vietnamese came and became kind of like the scapegoat for all of the problems.
Yes, a much less creative title could have been The Scapegoat. But and there's a lot of scapegoats here, I suppose, and primary causes as to what creates the conflict, which is the competition over what's available in the Gulf in terms of oysters and crab and especially shrimp. It's also an issue of, you talk about just economics. We learn which one of those and is the higher end and how hard it is to get them and what it takes. So there's so many different important players here that I want to kind of get into, but I got to ask where you found this story first yourself, Kurt. Where did you hear about this? Because everybody listening right now, most people, unless I don't know who would have heard this, where it was reported out, or I know it's been optioned into a movie I read by George Clooney. Congratulations on that. But where did you hear about it?
Thanks. The circumstances were, extraordinary looking back. But at the end of 2018, my dad died of cancer that was spurred in large part by his own exposure to Agent Orange during his deployment to Vietnam. He was with 101st Airborne. And I was in Los Angeles early morning when my mom called to give me the news. And I I told my wife, it felt wrong to just sit around the house like it was a normal day. I felt this kind of overwhelming need to be in a river and to be fishing because my dad taught me to fish. And I thought that would be some way to, I guess, start the morning process. And so I threw my gear into the trunk and I drove up into the southern Sierra Nevadas to go fishing. And I had the radio on, but I wasn't really listening. But then this song comes on by Bruce Springsteen called Galveston Bay. And it's all about this Vietnamese shrimper ends up in Texas, starts shrimping, and soon finds himself in the crosshairs of the Ku Klux Klan. And during the day, that the song kept popping back into my mind because I thought it was such a strange premise for a song. I didn't think it was based on anything, but it kind of lodged in my mind. And a few weeks later, when I finally thought to Google it, I realized, like, oh wow, this is true. I wonder who wrote that book. And then when I realized nobody had written it, I thought, well, there might be something here, but everyone's probably dead. But to my kind of eternal surprise and relief, like I managed to get nearly everybody involved in this story to talk to me, some of them just months before they died. So I feel like I got this story just in the nick of time.
You talked to like 40 or 50 people or no, I'm sorry.
I think it's hundreds.
I think I heard you say you interviewed certain people for 40 or 50 hours. Yeah. Well, yeah. It must be, oh gosh, I wish there were a word that I could think of better than bittersweet, but you lose your dad and you try to get out of town, try to find out, I guess, what life is like without your dad in it, who you are now. And your next book comes to you almost like your dad sent it your way. Have you thought about it that way at all?
Yeah, I have. And it's, the fact that he himself died of something toxic is not lost on me, but you can't see it from this camera angle, but I have his map of Vietnam that he deployed with hanging on the wall. And I frequently sort of referred to it when I was speaking with refugees to try to figure out where they were from. So, my family's had a long commitment to helping refugees and my dad included. And so, this was, I guess, some way of working through that loss, if that makes sense.
It's such a really fascinating book because of the real people, many of which you said, you featured. And I wanted to get into just a few of these characters that are so important. So Colonel Nam is one of the main guys. Tell me about his service. You already mentioned it, but this is a decorated serviceman who. Why did he come to the U.S.? He
had no plans to come to the U.S. In fact, he shaved his hair off in a ritual preparation for the final battle. When he got to the front, all of his men had basically melted away from the fight. It was already a lost cause. And he's driving his wife and some of his extended family down to one of the last ships in Saigon, trying to get out right before the fall. And one of his family members refused to let him leave, grabbed his car keys, I think chucked him into the water, and they basically dragged him on the boat. And so he had no plans to come here, but he, after being what we call a full bird colonel, defending South Vietnam, he ended up as a gas station attendant at an Exxon station in San Antonio, making $3 an hour, and saved up for many years until he could afford a kind of ramshackle fish house and a trawler in this little town of Seabrook. And he had this dream of just spending the rest of his days in peace and quiet, just sort of sorting the catch and having a kind of, a chance for some calm. But as soon as he got there, he was sort of recruited into the, protecting the Vietnamese.
Yeah, we'll talk about what he's protecting them from. But his story is not dissimilar to a lot of white boys in Texas who had a similar dream to work their way up in the industry. Who is Billy Joe Aplin?
Billy Joe he was from Florida originally. His family moved around a lot, but he he was a kind of down on his luck crabber in a different little town of Sea Drift, Texas, who, it's this way of life is, has some big swings. So he had finally saved up enough money to buy a shrimp boat, and the day that he was going to make his final payment on that boat, his net snagged on something and his boat sunk, and he got knocked back down to crabbing. And he himself in the 70s suspected the petrochemical plants of doing bad things to the bay. He kept pulling up these mutated crabs, but he couldn't get anyone to join his fight to try to take on these plants, because most of the shrimpers and crabbers, they all worked in these plants on the off season. So, I think he kind of felt maybe impotent, but angry that he just can't provide for his family. And one day he runs into an 18-year-old Vietnamese crabber named Sao Van Nguyen, who dropped his traps too close to Billy Joe's, apparently. This is one of the unwritten rules of crabbing. And Billy Joe just snapped. He, smashed the traps up. And then over the course of the subsequent month, he, kept threatening to kill Sao and slashed his tires. And eventually Sao got a pistol. And the next time Billy Joe attacked him, he shot him and he shot him dead.
That was who I was going to ask you about next. But before I get to one more character who's important to the book, I want to read a headline that I'm sure you're familiar with from August 9th, 1979. So, how many years ago is that to the day? I can't do the math. Is that 40 years? And
40.
And the headline is Killing Sharpens Texas Feud on Vietnamese Fishing. Let's read the first paragraph to folks. An ugly, long-simmering feud between Texas fishermen and Vietnamese refugees in a small town has finally exploded, with killing, several firebombings, and an attempted bombing in the last 5 days. The violence began Friday night when a fisherman named Billy Joe Aplin, 35 years old, was shot to death after a fight with several Vietnamese fishermen. And what's most fascinating is that the Vietnamese guy who you just talked about, I mean, I don't want to give anything away, but you're writing about a true story, but he was acquitted by an all-white jury because it was in self-defense. He was basically being stalked and bullied and attacked, and he gets attacked and he shoots the guy. Do I have that right? Is that headline?
Yeah. In fact, he was cut across his chest with a knife, and when shortly after killing Aplin, one of his best Vietnamese friends told him he had to get out of town because they were all worried that the local police was infiltrated by the Klan, which was not a crazy thought. There were all these photo series of Houston and Galveston cops wearing robes and hoods at night. So he flees to a different part of Texas, turns himself in, and everyone just assumes he's going to quickly get the death penalty. But, it's a credit to the justice system, but an all-white jury ultimately, and some of them were themselves veterans of the Vietnam War, voted to acquit him on grounds of lawful self-defense. And while some people were inspired by that verdict, what it did was it turned Billy Joe Aplin into a martyr.
Yeah.
And it basically, caused the tensions to spike. And shortly after that, the Ku Klux Klan entered the fray.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. But just to be clear, what I see developing, and just tell me what I'm missing here, is there's always going to be conflicts over turf, especially when it's fishing. These go back in every country. Fishing territory is fought over. You could argue the same for probably a lot of other, animal hunting and other things. Turf, drugs, everything. It's a turf battle. And so it's easy to look at somebody else who's your competition and saying they're cheating. And they might be. Guys do different things out there in the water or on the corner. But what seems to be the real issue that is creating problems for shrimpers, for fishermen in the Gulf, and I covered this for CNN after the oil spill in 2010, is oil, is chemicals. That's what's creating the shortage. That's what's creating the problems. It's not, I mean, certainly overfishing human beings are an issue, obviously, sure. but they're scapegoating, in this case, Vietnamese refugees, when the truth is, as Diane Wilson could tell us and told you for The Fisherman and the Dragon, these industries are really, really probably more primarily to blame, not to mention we could get into trade and other things. But tell me about her.
Diane is I don't think the book would exist without her in it, because, she was a fourth generation shrimper in this town of Seadrift. She was, to my knowledge, the first female shrimper in these bays. And it's not lost on me that being the only woman, she was, the only one that could correctly identify that the threat to their way of life was not the small number of refugees resettled there, but the massive plants belching out all this stuff into the skies and in the bays every day. But she, for that simple stance, saying, let's fight the plants, she lost nearly everything. I mean, this was a decades-long battle. Her husband left her. Her kids were furious at how this commitment was sort of taking her from them. All kinds of crazy stuff happened. Somebody shot her dog. Somebody sabotaged her boat, so she would sink in it. She went on hunger strikes. And for decades and decades, she kept on fighting until just a couple of years ago, she won the largest settlement in U.S. history under the Clean Water Act in a battle with Formosa Chemical, where she now represents really like one of the last best hopes for any fisherman on that bay, whether they're white or Vietnamese. And everyone thinks she's a multimillionaire now. I can assure you she's not. She lives off of $425 a month from Social Security.
Why didn't she get any money from that settlement?
Because she's committed to using it to clean up the bays and to rebuild some of the infrastructure that collapsed over decades of neglect. So ice houses and fish houses and things like that she's organizing the fishermen into a co-op so that they're not always competing against each other and driving the value of the catch down, but they're negotiating en masse to sell their catch to try to compete with the global market. These were all things that were spurned for decades, but she's a really inspiring individual.
She'd probably make a good interview. No offense. I'd like to steal her from you.
I'm happy to connect you.
So just take me back, tie it all together here a little bit. Well, I just wanted to get back to the role the Klan played. And then I also wanted to ask you kind of just foreshadowed it a little bit, about where the divisiveness lies in the fishing community and in those communities, the Vietnamese American community as well. But first, where does the Klan come in? And at what point do these Vietnamese immigrants, what do you call them? You wrote in the beginning of the book a note on language, and you wrote an interesting thing about, I think, refugees, which is, if you're saying it, whatever you say about refugees language-wise, I'm going with, Kurt.
Yeah. I mean, for these purposes, I've been saying refugees, but in the book, I've made a conscious decision on a couple things. One was that, after they arrived in the U.S., I just started referring to them by their names or as Vietnamese shrimpers or crabbers, because I didn't want people to think I was sort of pulling heartstrings or trying to kind of spotlight their refugee experience. This was a story about after they were refugees. But also, after speaking with Viet Thanh Nguyen, the novelist, I mean, the Pulitzer Prize winning novelist, but he encouraged me to avoid using the term boat people anymore, because his argument was that it basically reduces all of these people to one moment in their life when there was so much else that they lived through. But no, they, as the tensions grew, the Klan came in, and it was truly they were trying to turn them into refugees again. And there was these shocking rallies of 1,000+ people chanting white power, and they were burning effigies of Vietnamese boats. When the Klan went out into Galveston Bay, they hung an effigy of a Vietnamese refugee from one of the outriggers. And they really were planning on fleeing until Colonel Nem convince them to stand their ground and to put their trust in the Constitution. And I think, you can never prove these things. It's a counterfactual, I guess, but that I think by refusing to back down and by fighting them in court, I think that the Vietnamese on the Texas coast did a service to a generation of refugees, Vietnamese and others, because if the Klan had won here, if they had been permitted to do this, they were ready to replicate this campaign all over the country. Instead, their militia was dismantled and their Grand Dragon had to go into hiding, basically.
Well, I would bet on that counterfactual for sure. It certainly had some major impact. Hard to know whether it's regional or organization wide, if you will. How do you and did you find out if someone was a member of the Klan? Because there is membership. You go through a thing and you get certified, and if you get a card and a handshake, and you're in or you're out, you're a made man, right? Like how did you, as a journalist, to write this book, know who was in and who was out? Because that's another really fascinating thing about this book, how we learn that there were people that were in forever and no one ever knew.
Yeah, in fact, after Billy Joe Aplin was killed, that crabber down in Seadrift, there were all these rumors that the Klan was going to come to town, and nobody really understood why. This is a little town of 1,000 people, and it was a crazy story, but the whole town, 1,000 people got together in the school gymnasium, and they unanimously voted to condemn the Klan's visit, to tell them to stay away. But the Klan came anyways, and they got national news coverage. Cronkite covered it, which led to new members who were paying dues and all of this.
Oh.
And for decades, though, nobody understood what initially kind of sparked the Klan's interest. And it wasn't until my investigation, but I managed to go meet with the widow of Billy Joe Aplin, and she confessed to me that they had joined the Klan a year or so prior to the killing. And so that there's an answer there. But there were a number of moments where, I would talk with people who were at the heart of this, that burnt crosses, that told me they pointed on a map the exact location where they dug the hole for the cross. They showed me how they designed it and when they burned it, and who captained the boat that carried Klansmen out. But they would get really offended if I asked when they joined the Klan. They denied that they were Klansmen themselves. And I heard all this nonsense of like, well, you're thinking about the Klan wrong, that it's, in some cases, the Klan's almost like the Kiwanis or the Rotary Club or something, that it's a public service. And in this case, a lot of the white shrimpers told me, like, we went to the Klan because we know that everyone pays attention to the Klan, and we weren't getting the attention we were seeking. And so that's why we brought them in. But no, I'm not a Klansman, even though I saw them at rallies where people are chanting white power and Texas first and America first and the kind of slogans of the Ku Klux Klan in Texas. So, and then there were others that were just, quite happy to talk about their Klan membership.
How did you write this book? I'll let you go, but how do you meet all these people, do all this research? I know it took years, but then weave it into this amazing narrative. It was hard enough for me to kind of conduct this interview about this book, because it's just so layered with characters and narratives and really important factual information that I think touches on so many relevant issues right now in America and around the world today. But for you to put this all together, I don't know how you did it, or even if that's an interesting question. I guess just congratulations. I mean,
no, the truth is that it came from a brutal process of trial and error. And I mean, the first version of this book was, I think, another 250 pages longer. And so it's just a lot of brutal stress testing to figure out the structure and how to keep people reading and all, but also just making sure that I had it right. I mean, the last, 40 pages of the book are endnotes, because I'm dealing with such sensitive stuff that I wanted anyone who's starting to get a little defensive or have doubts to be able to go and look at the exact date that this person said it to me. But I was also really animated by the story itself, that this is about a way of life, about a group of Americans that I think felt that the world was changing too quickly for them, that they were looking to the future and they couldn't see a better life for their kids, and they thought maybe their best days were behind them. Yeah. and that there were all these big structural forces at work destroying their businesses, their ecosystems, their environment, and in some cases their bodies. I mean, this is, one of the most cancer heavy parts of the country because of that industry. And yet this demagogue sails in and says, these plants aren't your problem. All the concrete that was poured over those estuaries for hotels and vacation homes that killed off all the shrimp and crab, that's not what's really going on. What's really going on are these little people, these refugees that washed ashore. And if we get rid of them, everything will be great again. And so to me, this was a story that I think felt like a parable. That's why I gave it the title that it has, is because I didn't want people to think that this is so arcane and exclusive to Texas. This is happening all over the country and will continue to happen.
And in any burgeoning industry in America throughout history too. We've seen this play out so many times, but these Vietnamese people, you illustrate to us how hardworking they were. I suppose, seeing this opportunity that they had now in America, they wanted to take advantage of it. So they fixed up those boats and they worked the hours and they did all the hard physical labor in the hot Texas sun. And they were rewarded with violence and hatred and divisiveness, even though the issue wasn't their fault. It's also a missed opportunity to appreciate Vietnamese culture. That's
exactly right.
It's you've done it again, Kirk Wallace Johnson. Congratulations on the new book. I hope everybody goes and gets it, and hopefully someday they'll be able to see the film about it, because it is a really, really important story, and it is a parable. And I love catching up with you, man. I'd love to talk more about it and the issues that you talk about, and really are an expert on another time soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pete. It's great to see you.
Kirk Wallace Johnson, the fisherman and the dragon. Kirk W. Johnson on Twitter, and check him out. All the links in the show notes. Such a very, very interesting book. He's such a great writer. So happy to have had him on the program. And now it's time to get to my second guest, but I do want to remind you this week we are sponsored by Indeed.com. So if you're a company or a firm, you have a job and you can hire people at the job, you should use Indeed.com. Indeed.com/standup. They are a sponsor, and I do appreciate that. And I hope that you'll check out that link. Even if you're not hiring anybody, just go get the link and we'll hopefully you'll find something there. Indeed.com/standup right now. If you're needing to hire someone, you need Indeed. Start hiring now. The $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/standup. Offers only good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit right now at Indeed.com/standup. And I should tell you, terms and conditions do apply. Okay. Now I'm very happy to bring on J.L. Cauvin. He is always a home run, in my opinion, whether he's doing his impersonations, I'm leaving it in, impersonations, or his podcast, or he is on the show being interviewed by someone. I always love JL. He's become a good friend of mine at JL Cauvin on Twitter, jlcauvin.com. He's going to have a new special coming out that I warmed up the audience for, and I'm very happy to have him here. He's been on the Howard Stern Show, the Adam Carolla Show, which is, by the way, if you're looking for the voice twin for my first guest, Kirk Wallace Johnson, that's who he sounds like. Adam Carolla. Yeah, go back and listen if you don't believe me. You've heard him, of course, on Sirius XM. He's been on The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson. I'm very happy to have him. He even did a cameo or an appearance on the show Billions. How about it? He's on all the social media networks, and you should listen to his podcasts, which are very funny. Righteous Prick and Making Podcasts Great Again. Ladies and gentlemen, you know him. You love him. J.L. Cauvin. How are you on the record here? I mean, I haven't talked to you in a long time. Would you rate yourself 1 to 10? 1 is really in bad shape. 10 is the best you've ever been. Where are you in there day to day, with your life, your work, your career, relationship? Because you bear it all on your podcasts and on social media. I've been listening to Righteous Prick, and I don't know where you're at.
Well, 48 hours ago, I was pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I woke up with a major neck problem yesterday.
Oh, no.
So it's one of those things that I often think I'll get morose right away and darkly humorous. Sometimes I think if I have a toothache, it's never the big things. It's always like, I got a really bad neck pain. I'm going to have a doctor look at this, probably anti-inflammatories. But I sort of go, when does it stop? When does the phone bill stop coming? When does the neck pain stop? And I go, death.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's not a trade I want to make. It's still worth enduring the little problems of life.
I think everybody's got that going on now, and more people are recognizing what I just heard a talk about. I think Muhammad Ali called it, or some quotes about, every thinker has this idea, but those things, the neck pain or the to-do list, is the pebble in your shoe, and those pebbles add up and can be much more momentous than some of the more obvious big things that cause suffering. Sometimes those little things. But my gums hurt for the last 2 days. My lower gums are hurting, and I've decided it's going to go away. Not unlike mechanical issues with my cars. They go away if you don't get them looked at.
Yeah, brake failure. Eventually, it's not going to be an issue anymore. I
let the car, the original Chevy Volt, the OG, the battery died, and then a year later, it just started working again.
Oh, cool.
Makes no sense.
Thanks, Joe Biden. He's just making everything come back.
So, other than neck pain, you've been prolific lately. You've got all kinds of extra stuff that is coming out for your paid subscribers on Patreon. You've got the normal stuff, and you're putting out videos that are going big, and you certainly haven't had any shortage of material. But even if you did, you come up with stuff like this Dave Chappelle doing the Pinocchio thing, which is a great idea, and you've got the Mike Pence podcast. But I got to ask you about Trump. One thing you and I had talked about, you're the best Trump impersonator in the country, and oh, by the way, I just suggested you for a fundraiser for a local Democratic Party for no money. And so
perfect. That's a little above my usual pay. Usually I like to lose money on gigs, but I'll take net zero. Just like our carbon emissions, I want my career to be net zero.
No, you still have to get to the gig. We're not paying for that either. So you'll still lose money. I'm saying what my point was that when Biden got elected, we wondered where Trump would go. And you thought, and I think grappled to some extent with what you would do with your impersonation of him. He's still everywhere. And I got to ask you first, kind of a technical question or a culture. Should we be hearing from him? Should media be reporting to his reaction to the FBI search of his home? Because now we're already hearing the conspiracies. They were there to plant things there. Should we be paying attention to him and reporting what he says first? And then we can have some fun, I think, with it.
Yeah, I think we should. I think what we do is we sort of conflate media and their general role to report on a major newsmaker, an influential political figure, and what conservative media does in terms of weaponizing him. So it's like, should they be doing that? No. But should honest brokers of news be reporting on Donald Trump? I think, of course. Like, sad to say, there is 25% of this country would sell out Jesus Christ for Donald Trump, and has, really, if you think about it. But he is, I would love him to go away. Some of my fans who listen to both my podcasts know that I at this point sort of don't enjoy doing the Trump podcast, except I'm still I have gotten only better at doing it. And I sort of impressed myself with the ability to make him feel funny and relevant via a podcast with him now as like the president of Mar-a-Lago, just kind of almost turning it into a spinoff. But it's, I'll never forgive COVID for not taking Donald Trump. That's the first thing. Like, I could look past a lot of things, coronavirus, but letting him walk was really unforgivable. And we're in a weird, I think they should, sorry, before I get on one of my rambles. Yes, we should be reporting him. And I think we conflate the dishonest media with regular media in terms of whether we should report on him and what he says. Unfortunately, though, he has morphed into a cult leader, but he is a cult leader who happened to have been president of the United States.
Yeah. Yeah, and it would happen to have taken a whole bunch of boxes. What's your speculation on this? There seems to be no real concrete reporting other than there's only 6 to 8 people who knew about this safe, according to Mick Mulvaney. And so the only decent reporting right now that seems accurate is that there's a mole. So that's interesting. But we really don't know what was in those documents. And people are speculating it could be anything from things he can use to have leverage over and blackmail people as the mafia boss that he is to selling state secrets to the Saudis, Chinese, or Russians. Those are the two that seem most Trump-like to me, but there's no evidence of any of that. And furthermore, and finally, he could always, the whole time he was there, he could have gotten a copy of anything or gotten and just threw it in a file himself and then told somebody, those are the things that go home with me. I mean, I don't know why that's a big deal, but what are your thoughts on what this is all about, and if there's anything big enough for it to matter, or if it ends up just only further deteriorating the reputation of the Department of Justice and the FBI as somehow being political, partisan, corrupt institutions?
Well, I think the same way Republicans wanted to portray Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, to be honest, as both feeble-minded, low-energy morons and the most conniving, corrupt masterminds on earth, I think with Merrick Garland, it can't be both ways. It can't be that he is too deliberate and slow and afraid of political consequences and willing to go here. So if he's made this move, I think based on his temperament, to many people, his overly deliberate pace, then he's got to have good reason to have gone to this step. I don't think he was somebody who was being cowed by liberals that he's moving too slowly or taking too much time. I think whatever he believes is in these files, or whatever he's been given reason to believe is in these files, has to rise to a level of this is worth it. The juice is worth the squeeze. This may not impress MAGA Nation. Nothing will at this point. They'll claim they're already doing they planted they're already leading with the planting of evidence thing, which tells you maybe there is going to be some smoking gun here on some issue. So I just think there's the MAGA diehards are a lost cause. And that's the thing the Bill Maher's of the world still try to say, you can hate Trump, but you can't hate all his supporters. That's a common refrain he says on his show. And I'm at the point where I go, I don't want to have hate in my heart, but I can write them off. At this point, they're dead weight. They're moral, political, and progress dead weight as far as America and its journey are concerned. Just like the Confederates and the people who supported Jim Crow, you have to leave them behind. You may be dragged a little bit with them like an anchor, but they are done. They are done as far as if you are part of the MAGA movement. I don't care how loud, passionate, psychologically unstable you are an impediment to American and world progress, and you are not going to be part of the solution. This whole idea of when people say, and I know some people say it for political purposes, like at the January 6th hearings, where it's Donald Trump knew this election was not stolen, but his supporters were misled. They believed him. And I go, okay. Still pieces of shit. And I'm sorry. It's if you got to January 6th and were I'm going to the Capitol because Donald Trump told me that this election has been stolen, and I accept his word as all the, faith-based, I accept what he says as enough for me, you're already done. It's the De Niro quote from Casino when the guy is fucking up the slot machines. He says, you are either in on it or you are too stupid. Either way, I cannot have you here. It's that point, that MAGA support at this point, I don't care if it's 5 people or 50 million. They are no longer part of any kind of community they have to be overcome. This is not some sort of call to violence. Of course, this is overwhelmed and overcome at the ballot box until they are a fringe part of the American story. Period. That's it. There's no more, to me, there's no more, anxiety. No, at this point, Joe Biden is delivering for these people in spite of them. And they will not accept that. They don't want to accept it. Joe Biden is like the during Jim Crow, the black person who served in the military. You don't look at that and say, and not to equate, if anybody's listening, I'm not equating the two. I'm just saying the same kind of feeling. They don't want help from a Democrat. That's actually worse to them. They'd rather at this point suffer and know that like Trump is their president than to be like, I hate that Joe Biden gave me a tax subsidy or made my school better, or they don't want that. It's shaming because they've spent so much time deriding Democrats that to get help is actually worse than having no help at all. And it reminds me of like when soldiers came back from World War II and were lynched in the South and were attacked because wearing that uniform was almost worse. Like, this person fought for this country and now thinks that they're better than me because they've done some admirable things and have support. Yeah. And there's that, it's almost that mindset now, the kind of Democrat, like, I have to believe Joe Biden is Satan and senile and every bad thing I can think of because I don't want his help. I have been trained that my heart was black enough to be open to this nonsense. And now I'm fully bought in that Democrats are the problem. Democrats could hand me a check for $1 million, clean the environment, and send my kids to whatever Bible Christian school for free that I want them to go to. And I'd still say Donald Trump is my president. There's an agenda here with the Democrats.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate analysis for a frighteningly large group of people. The January 6th insurrection was one of the only things that really peeled Trump supporters, if you want to call them diehards or not, in the administration, especially, we know some, but others as well, away. I mean, all these other things that you thought might shake people, from his criticism to John McCain, to the credible accusations of rape, to the Access Hollywood tape, to all the policies that he promoted in the past, the lies, the work, the loving of dictators, all these things that you thought maybe, hey, is that too much for you? But January 6th did seem to peel some people away, or at least it sounds like you're saying if after January 6th they were still hanging tough, then I'm writing them off.
Writing them off. It's just you are not part of a debate, a conference, a compromise, a solution. You are just one of those fringe political groups that in other countries makes noise once in a while, but never again attains any actual clout.
How do you see, as a result of those that are still supporting him, and as a result of the most recent statewide elections that have been taking place, primaries, etc., how do you see what a lot of experts are calling a threat to our democracy in terms specifically of electing people anywhere from governor to attorney general to secretaries of state and those who have anything to do with the elections in the state that are election deniers? How do you see that trend going? Some are winning, some are losing. How concerned are you about that? And how much do you agree with, a lot of the experts that are warning about how big of a threat that these election deniers are?
Yeah, I think that it makes you really surprised that Arizona was the last state to make Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a holiday. Who'd have thunk this state would be full of pieces of shit?
You're talking about that in the primaries. They just nominated or elected
the slate. They went like a perfect sweep of sort of Trump acolytes who sound like crazy people. I have to hope that the state that gave us Mark Kelly, Kyrsten Sinema, and John McCain will reject that group of candidates, even if it's 52% to 48%. Yeah. You have to hope that that coalition of Democrats and sane Republicans will push them back. I think obviously a lot of people were talking about Democrats supporting far right candidates, trying to boost their candidacies, like in Michigan.
Yeah. What do you think of that tactic?
At first, I was like, well, on principle, I understand what they're saying, especially if you are somebody like Pete Meyer, who's like, hey, I I did the thing. I did the thing that people say they want their politicians to do.
Republican who voted to impeach. And
first term, last term. He did the absolute right thing. But, I think when you're, a multimillionaire, I think courage, I'm more surprised at how little courage there is among 80-year-old millionaires in the Senate. It's like, what do you do? Like, what's going on? Why don't you have it? It doesn't even take that much courage for you to actually stand on principle relative to like if your career's just starting. Like if you're broke and you're in your first term in office, that is the most courage it takes to be like, impeach. I'll find a new job and a new career and a way to protect my family from these psychos. But Chuck, when you have a Chuck Grassley on his deathbed going, I'd vote for Trump if I could live till the next election. I'd still support. Like, okay, good. Go. To explain yourself to St. Peter when you get there. Like, why were your last words? I'd still vote for Trump. You really had nothing left to lose at that point.
Hey, did you see last night? Sheriff Joe Arpaio lost his election. He's 90. He was still. He had been pardoned by Trump. He's a criminal. He's a terrible person, and apparently he did not win.
I felt bad. You want to see somebody go out with a champion. It's like don't do the Jordan of racism Washington Wizards stint. You hit the buzzer beater with Trump giving you a pardon. You won your 6th racist title. You take go off into the MAGA Hall of Fame, first ballot. Don't come back and start taking L's. But I was going to say with the one reason I'm okay with what the Democrats were doing is that now the Senate is really in play, and it'd be great to see Mitch McConnell not be majority leader again. But Kevin McCarthy is very likely to be majority leader of the House.
The Speaker, yeah.
And Speaker. And that is as offensive as anything short of Trump winning re-election, because Kevin McCarthy is like a real spineless bitch.
Wow,
and
that is
dumb. And so, like, the idea that, and I said this, I think, on your podcast earlier, like maybe a year ago, I said, I would love it if some of the senators and some of the representatives but none of them will be there, who voted against Trump, who voted to remove Trump, if they would change to independent and caucus with the Democrats, still vote like a Liz Cheney, vote 98% with the Republicans, but don't let Kevin McCarthy or Mitch McConnell, two people with the power to swing some shit who didn't, or at least you did not use their leadership posts to try and influence their members, but simply followed the herd, them gaining leadership at the very next opportunity since January 6th. Like, January 6th will be less than 2 years, and they might be running the chamber. Like they might be back running the Senate and the House. Like, literally, they will have paid no career consequences for enabling a travesty of justice. And Kevin McCarthy, is particularly sort of without a spine. And the idea of him, so if you can keep him even by the thinnest of margins from becoming Speaker of the House, I do think that's worth playing some dirty tricks.
I completely agree with that. And can you just imagine, Joe, what the types of investigations there will be if Jim Jordan is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, or if Matt Gaetz is the chairman of the
guess who's coming back onto committees? Marjorie Taylor Greene.
That's right. She got kicked off of committees for
Dog the Bounty Hunter is now back and
never heard it.
Out for justice.
Wow. Yeah, she is. Really. What's interesting is that apparently I read that there's beef or resentment or problems between Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. That Lauren Boebert does not like her, that she thinks she's too much.
Yeah, I mean, that's cute and dumb versus ugly and evil.
I knew you were going to say something lightly sexist.
No, that was very sexist. Lauren Boebert, on my Patreon, if you want to hear me say all the things that you'd think I wouldn't be afraid to say in real life, I ranked.
You have a vile comparison between the two candidates for governor in Michigan. which one of them is hotter. It's just disgusting.
But that's funny that I really do have that. And I said that, what's her name? Tudor Dixon?
Yeah, that's her name.
I said, the problem is she didn't make my list of Republican women that I would if no one could find out. Because the problem with her is, all things equal, I prefer Gretchen Whitmer. Politics aside, I prefer leather jacket clad Gretchen Whitmer to Tudor Dixon. So if you're going to make the list of Republican women JL would hook up with if no one ever found out, you've got to be clearly ahead of your Democratic counterpart.
It is weird that I will say this one sexist thing, because I think it's true, that your sex appeal, how attractive you are, male or female, as a politician, you know, we have these sexist jokes about I'm a comedian 7, so I'm hot for a comedian. I'm if I'm a teacher 8, all those sexist things. But when politicians, and particularly women, but I would say the same for men. I mean, what's his name? The guy with the strong jaw, the senator.
John Thune?
Thune. You know who I was talking about before.
Why did I know that?
Because his jaw.
Because his jaw. John Thune.
Because he's like a classically handsome George Bush looking, guy, George H.W. Bush looking guy with that jaw, and you just get confused for a second. But when it comes to women, and I don't want to spend any more time on this, like, I just do want to admit, I'm calling you sexist. I'd be lying if I didn't. I looked at a bunch of pictures at Tudor Nixon because I couldn't believe this Republican woman who's a Trump supporter was so beautiful. She wasn't like beautiful for a politician, that sexist framing I'm giving you. This is a woman, and so is Gretchen Whitmer. They're both absolutely beautiful women, and there's certainly several women that are in politics that are, and increasingly so, and it matters. Youth matters, and it's a double standard for women, but men, all that shit matters. You look at Beto O'Rourke, women go gaga for him.
And I will say this, one last month, the number one on the list, which was unexpected, but shows some character on my part, Liz Cheney. I said great calves, great fighter for democracy, and has the tone of a woman that you can never please. And it feels that's kind of a turn on, like such a like when she's talking about saving democracy, and she just couldn't be less impressed.
Are you attracted to someone that you could never please? Is that your thing?
I don't. Well, with her, she's so blasé that you just feel like, can I get something for you? Like,
hard
is this working for you?
Hard to impress. I've always felt.
Do you like this, Liz?
Yeah.
Do you want are we good? Like, what's? Do we need to see couples counseling? Like, I guess I just have that's a real fetish for me. Couples counseling. No.
Couples counseling is a fetish for you. We haven't talked in a while, and I wanted to get your take on some of the.
By the way, the Arctic is melting at a rate much faster. That was a New York Times headline right before I joined this chat. Melting far faster than scientists previously thought. So, that's scary.
Climate change is causing rapid Arctic warming. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. Yeah, I've seen that headline. Blank is warming faster than experts predicted so many times. And it's the most depressing of headlines, but it's also the most infuriating because the opposition to the science around climate change is that it's a conspiracy, right? Or that it's not happening. And the truth is, the real truth seems to be that the scientists have been too conservative, or their numbers are off in that it's happening faster than they predicted. And there's really nothing that takes me down more than that headline. So thanks for slipping that in.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. But it does infuriate me when people, from Joe Manchin to every Republican apparently, votes against doing what little could even potentially possibly slow the pace of change even a little bit. It infuriates me.
What I believe, and then we can move on. What I feel, I didn't post this tweet, but it's something I feel. Joe Manchin, in a normal America, in an America that was leading the world, focused on important problems, Joe Manchin would be the majority leader or the minority leader for the GOP. Like, in other words, I'm not saying he's perfect, but in a GOP that has pro-life components, that has industry, but but can still be focused on people to a certain extent. Like Joe Manchin should be the best Republican or like the leader of a Republican Party, not the fit last Democrat and the only hope for the country.
Yeah.
Like in other words, like we should have a Democratic Party that's deciding between Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren and coming up with like some happy medium between those two approaches and overwhelming the 30 Republican senators led by leathery but somewhat charming Joe Manchin. Instead, it's like Joe Manchin's the 50th for any hope of anything. And we're not a normal country anymore.
Yeah, on so many issues. And let me just ask you about a few more of those, because part of the reason why we aren't is the Supreme Court. And, you know, whether we look at women's reproductive rights, I almost like want to skip abortion with you to get to LGBT stuff, because what I'm seeing happening in the country and even with young people, you know, I thought my daughters would be done with this, and we don't live in some backwoods, you know, very overtly religious community. But my daughter was arguing with two of her good male friends the other day about homosexuality. And it was just, I just thought that their generation, they wouldn't have as many issues. And that's just one anecdote. But more importantly, what we're seeing is a regression on attitudes towards, you know, gay marriage equality, much less trans issues and some of these newer things that people are really still trying to understand. Just on marriage equality, JL, because of the Supreme Court decision on women's reproductive rights, we're seeing a lot of outspoken Republicans running for office and right-wing media members openly start questioning what we thought was a right that had been gained and wouldn't lose. So whether it's women's reproductive rights, voting rights, or marriage rights, equality rights, we're losing rights.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say to you, not to one up your daughter's conversations about gay rights and stuff. I mean, I have my nephew, who is under 18, has experienced since Trump, and I do believe that has something to do with it. I don't know if I've told you these stories, but like he has experienced like actual like racial slurs and stuff from classmates and teammates. Ugh. And
what does he look like?
He is 3/4 black.
So he's a darker skin. It's pretty obvious he's darker skinned than the other students. Is that what you're saying?
No, he presents as black.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
And
I just wanted you to paint an actual picture of him.
Sure.
Could you hold up a photo of him for people who will see this?
Right. He had told me that a guy came up to him at the local gym when he was working out over the weekend, and he was wearing a T-shirt from his high school, which is, as of this coming year, will no longer be his high school, despite his athletic and academic excellence at the school. For obvious reasons to me and the rest of his family, he is going to a different school next year. And yet he's in the position of not wanting to make too big a deal of it, because he knows kids could get expelled for some of the things they said. And he takes the road of like, I'd rather just avoid this. And it's sad. It's sad that when you are in the position of absolutely being correct, that he doesn't want that stigma of being like almost, well, you're the snitch who got the freshman expelled. That's for another story. That's just, you know, it's a lot of weight to put on a kid when he's not in a majority minority school, not to use the phrase that Dr. Christina Greer, you didn't have. Dr. Christina Greer said the irony of a majority minority phrasing, but you know what I mean?
Yes.
I understand where he's coming from, because it's like, that's a lot. He's not looking to sort of be the leader of anything. And that's a lot of weight for a 15-year-old to bear. But what I will say is a guy came up to him at the gym when he saw him wearing that T-shirt and said, oh, I graduated from there. A person was about 8 years older than him. So an adult, recently out of college, and said, can I ask you a question? And this person was a black man, asked him and said, have you experienced any racist shit there? And my nephew was like, yeah. And I feel like this young man was probably reaching out, probably thought, should I or should I not? But probably thought, I had a bad experience at that school. And I wonder if things have changed for a young black kid like this. And I thought, what a condemnation of the school. Because you're not talking class of 1965 talking to class of 2005. You're talking class of 2015 talking to class of 2025 saying, is shit still racist? And it may just be a matter of New Jersey's unique demographics where it's a strong blue state, but people who are red in this state seem to be Mississippi red.
Yeah.
And I'm not even kidding there. I'm not like Ocean County had the same vaccination rate as Mississippi.
Wow. Well, so, that's a real sign. Yeah.
Right. But it may just be my New Jersey and my nephew coming of age. But ever since Trump, that just happened to be when he was entering double digits in age. So you start to hear different things. But I've heard stories from my brother's family about racist comments and racist things that I felt like weren't said out loud. And it made me realize today is my father passed away several years ago, but it would have been his 91st birthday today. And I remember my mom telling me a story of them in the early 70s going to the Poconos and being told that there was a mistake. We actually don't have any reservations when the biracial couple in 1971 shows up. And in my head, I thought, what's worse? We all know that was racism, but what's worse? That they tried to be polite about it in 1971, like lie and be like, we know we're not supposed to say this. So actually a mistake was made. Or that in 2022, I have a family member hearing actual slurs.
Yeah.
Like on a curve, it's not even close. Like that's a disgrace.
Yeah.
That's happening now.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to be making progress. So when you bring up LGBTQ stuff, I hate to say this, not surprised, because I've been surprised at the increase in actual racist things.
Yeah.
That I feel like I didn't hear as much, like I didn't, and I have plenty of stories about what I've heard based on how I look. But so the LGBTQ stuff is just the easiest. It's the lowest hanging fruit, pardon the pun, of where they can go next if they want to undo things. They know that race is like the final level. Like in MAGA, the video game, race is the big boss that they have to defeat at the end. LGBTQ is like the third level where it's like, like they've got some weak spots. You can exploit the church. You can exploit things and get some allies. But race, you have to acquire all your bonus powers before you take on race, before you try to bring back racism fully in MAGA, the video game.
That's a really good point. I mean, what I'm kind of hearing you say, though, what I've certainly seen myself, and I think it's pretty clear, is that
a regression across the board.
Yeah, but more of certainly a total regression. I mean, even young people learning to hate in ways that we didn't think, but also just kind of, I mean, this has been poured over by experts, but we're just talking about your own experiences and your nephew. I think you were talking about. Is this the kind of the overtness? People always were going to continue to be racist or bigoted, and it's never going to go away. But the comfort that people feel, they feel like they have a certain cover to say things in a school, in an organization, at a company. That's, I guess, what
I think that is that may be the biggest cultural impact of Donald Trump. And I really believe that, because he basically told people that your bad thoughts that your boss doesn't like or that your teacher doesn't like, that's just
that your HR department doesn't like about how you're treating, a woman at work.
Right. That's just political correct wokeness.
Yeah.
And if you don't like PC culture and wokeness, the answer is to reject their rules, reject their customs.
I think you're absolutely right about the impact of Trump, but what's another example? What's another word for wokeness? If we could replace it to them, like it's not what you're not allowed.
Well, as I joked on my special, which hopefully will be ready sometime this month, I said, wokeness, you mean compassion? You mean understanding? You mean respect? And I know, don't get me wrong, we both know, we're both comedians. I'm not giving a blanket pass to every complaint and every issue somebody has with a joke or this or that. But a lot of the time you read it and go, oh my God. Oh yes. There was an article on the front page of the Times about like Treasury secretaries. This was earlier this week. Treasury secretaries basically divesting from certain financial and like hedge funds and things that had climate agendas. And one of the Treasury secretaries,
that state level secretaries of the Treasury were fighting the practical, affordable investments into energy and trying to
like having portfolios that were
a bunch of red states. Treasury secretaries are basically trying to bring back coal.
It was almost all of them. It was like 24 states or something.
Horrible.
It was like,
go ahead. I saw that story. Go ahead.
And they literally referred to places like BlackRock,
the financial equity private,
and like Citibank, as like, we've had enough of their woke capitalism. And I was like, well, now you're a fucking parody of yourself. Yes, big banks. The big problem with them is for too long, they've been too woke. What are you talking about? But it's people aren't going to read the article. They might see a blurb in their local paper or on their Sinclair news broadcast where the Treasury secretary of your state is going, we're tired of woke banks coming. And they'll go, yeah, now banks are getting woke. And it's like, yeah, sure. Wells Fargo, I'm sure at some point will be called woke. And they're horrible. They're definitely not woke. But at some point, we're going to get to that level of parody. Like the slave traders that didn't break up families. Oh, great. More woke capitalism from whoever.
Yeah, no, it's I'm glad you mentioned that story and that trend, because it's a really great example.
But it makes woke really feel like a parody. Like it's already become sort of a catch-all word for is somebody doing something that Democrats like? Woke.
Yeah, but it's more than just politics and Democrats. It's comedians, podcasts. It's
the best thing to be when you can monetize the perception of being canceled. That's the sweet spot in comedy right now. Like, if you can sort of wow, they didn't want you to use that joke where you said 4 racial slurs. This is the problem. This is what's happening with comedy. It's too much cancel culture. I'm going to now, I see comedy fans who seem to support certain comedians, funny or not, almost like, well, you're part of a movement. You're funny, but I want to support you because I feel like you're fighting wokeness and cancel culture. Whereas it's like, if you're just funny, cool.
Yeah. No, I can't stand the idea that there's any responsibility to be political or social or in any way with your comedy. If you do, great. If you don't, great. Don't care. Funny is what I'm looking for with my comedy. What about, though, Alex Jones and Steve Bannon? I mean, Alex Jones now, jail, seems to be pretty acceptable with a whole bunch of people, including Donald Trump. He said himself this week, basically something, I saw the headline, we're now the Republican Party. Like, he is he's mainstream. And
yes,
that's and so is Steve Bannon, and they're martyrs as well. And Donald Trump is also a victim. So many powerful white male victims in right-wing media, much less politics. What do you make of Alex Jones and his mainstreaming, even though he did potentially one of the worst possible thing that you could do with these Sandy Hook families, which is to deny that their dead children lived, much less died?
Yeah. I mean, when I saw I saw something on the news where they list, $45.3 million to so-and-so, to like the family or whatever. And I just thought to myself, that's so much money. And it's one of those cases where you go, doesn't matter. Those people may not even want to use that money. They may not even want that money. Like, they want it as a punishment for Alex Jones, for justice for the kid. But like, there is no healing that wound. And it's like the only joy there, I think, and that's a tough word, is like, at least it hurt him. But he's so rich. One of the things I learned is how fucking rich Alex Jones is.
Yeah.
That was disturbing to me. Because people can complain about Joe Rogan all they want. Joe Rogan has been an entertainer and a success in like 4 different fields.
Yeah.
He has put together a successful show when nobody was paying attention to him. I don't necessarily think he tapped in like with an agenda from the start.
No, but I mean, you're talking about his commentary to MMA is legit. His hosting of Fear Factor was legit. These are all legit ways for him to make money.
Kickboxing champion, actor, no, and you can quibble with what his show is now or who his audience is, but his audience is still broad. It's the Alex Jones getting rich that's weird, because it's like there was never any other reason to be a fan of Alex Jones, as far as I can tell, other than he's an angry conspiracy spewing person. So he was able to become huge and very, very rich from that.
Well, by the way, Joe Rogan said something like a couple weeks ago or last week that he was defending Alex Jones, who he's friends with. And he was saying, he's a performance artist. And I was so disgusted. There's nobody that's more disgusting to me that I know of. And I've included violent criminals because a lot of times they've only committed one crime, or they're broken people, or you can almost explain it away. Like what Alex Jones, he and Donald Trump are two of the most disgusting human beings. I don't like to dehumanize people, even them, but they are the most disgusting human beings. And for Joe Rogan or anybody to give them a pass, their behavior a behalf, it says something. Give their behavior a pass. It says something about them, and I cannot get over that. I cannot allow.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't realize that, because to me, it's one thing. Hey, if you're friends with somebody, if you've got a long built up personal loyalty, then don't say anything. I think that's the best you could do. And even way. You could just not say anything. You'd be like, I can't defend this. I can't. Me and Alex go way back. He's been cool with me. I disagree with this. I'm not going to abandon him as a person, but I'm certainly not going to platform a defense for him. Right. This is indefensible. I think people on a human level could appreciate that. Like Chris Cuomo not reporting on Andrew Cuomo, to me, not to equate the two. But it's on a human level, you go, well, yeah, it's his brother. What do you expect? Honestly, CNN probably should have just taken him off the air.
Yeah, but he also is working for a corporate.
But even that, I'm just saying on a human level, I'm not I never thought CNN was wrong for getting rid of him. But I'm also saying on a human level, it's his brother. What do you want to? It's why spouses can't be compelled to testify in court, because what do you expect? Do you expect them to rat on somebody so close, or to be totally objective with somebody so close to them? But with Alex Jones, I think with the Republican Party in general, I think he's right. I think they are the mainstream Republican Party. And it's up to all the Republicans who are disgusted by Donald Trump. It's up to them to walk away, period. Because if you're left with, if the Trump supporters, not the people willing to ride the Trump wave to lower taxes and things like that, but if the Trump supporters are left alone, that is a permanently fringe party that will have a Matt Gaetz or a Marjorie Taylor Greene always popping up in the House, but they will no longer be viable nationally. But the problem is there are too many Republicans, as we've seen throughout Trump. Well, I'm just going to go along with it because I think I can benefit without total anarchy and destruction. Yeah. And I'm hoping enough now see that the only path forward is anarchy and destruction, giving him that power again and giving Trump acolytes power over elections. I try not to be alarmist, but it's one of those things where you go, it sounds like a cliche, but it really is. It's humanity, it's Earth, it's America versus MAGA. That's it. It's not, and I know in a weird way, Donald Trump probably gets rock hard when he hears that, because it's I get to be Thanos. I'm better to be the biggest villain than just one of 45 or 46 presidents.
Yeah.
I would rather stand out. It's the Jack Sparrow line, not to quote Johnny Depp, even though my girlfriend is still sort of a ride or die Johnny Depp fan.
Interesting.
She's with me. So it's clearly, the moral compass is broken. But when Johnny Depp, when they say to Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean 1, Jack Sparrow, a guy walks up to him and says, "You're the worst pirate I've ever heard of." And Johnny Depp takes a beat in that Oscar-nominated performance and goes, "But you have heard of me." And I think that's Donald Trump's infamy is way better than just being famous.
Billy the Kid.
Because a lot of people are famous, but there's only one Hitler. There's only one Trump.
And his generals were, why can't my generals be like Hitler's generals?
Yeah. That's, I mean, yeah.
Did you read that article? Did you read that?
I have it right here open. I haven't read it yet. I was reading something else in the New Yorker this morning with my coffee.
Yeah. Look at you.
Yeah, if it wasn't so dangerous and so plausible now that we've learned what the DNA of our country really is, it's a total parody. He's a Mel Brooks musical.
I think that, by the way,
but it can happen again.
I think that from everything that I've seen, and maybe someone's going to lash out at me, and they should, because maybe I've missed something. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, is a complicated yet intelligent guy who mostly did the right thing, and he looks really good for it. He really did a lot of, I think he was very, very important in that last post-election and maybe before as well, in protecting the planet from, bad people taking over in the Department of Defense.
And that's why he is a woke general.
Oh, right. He's been referred. It's crazy to see Republicans ridicule Marines,
lifelong
veterans,
combat armed forces servants.
It's always been a thing that most people with any common sense
burn pits with your guy Paul Rykoff.
Yeah,
I mean. And I want, if you have him on, sorry to interrupt, but do you think you'll be having him on soon? Because I'm just curious, and this is not an attack, but I'd be curious because I know you guys have gotten into it, and I side with you on this case, where he sort of wants to carve out that silent majority or silent plurality is really independence. That's kind of his thesis of a lot of what he says, which is we need a third way. Both parties are not doing. But after the burn pits thing, I'm curious, as a good red meat example, do you still see that maybe it's right and wrong right now are the two sides? Forget party labels, but there's a right and a wrong. And until we all can be safely in the right, can we pause on both sides are not addressing the needs? Because Joe Biden has had actually a very strong, and now with inflation and gas prices going down, so those little kitchen table issues.
And the job market returning from pre-COVID eras and, and major legislation.
Other than just saying, I don't like Democrats or I think Joe Biden is old, his resume right now is as good as you could hope for.
And a lot of that credit
Senate
needs to go to Democrats in the Senate and obviously in the House and Nancy Pelosi. But how about this? Not only about people in general. Wajid Ali tweeted almost exactly what you're saying, but more about, I think, professional reporters when he wrote yesterday, when Republicans are telling you they'll go full fascist if they gain power, you should take them literally and seriously instead of doing a, quote, both sides analysis.
Yeah.
It's okay for journalists to be biased against fascism. The water is warm here. Jump in.
I did read that. I think maybe did you retweet it?
Yeah, I did. That was a good one.
That's how I saw it.
Yeah.
But without, this is not an attack on Paul, because I think obviously he's somebody of principle who
he's right.
believes
I think he's
an independent pathway. But right now, that argument really would, because I remember you guys kind of got into a friendly but forceful kind of argument over, and I think it's only more apparent now.
Maybe I'll have you on with him. I'm thinking about more ways to have certain people on with each other. You listen to this show a lot. The guests.
Amherst versus Williams. It's a liberal arts clash of the titans.
I'm sure that would be a really fun conversation. All right. Well, I actually have to wrap this one up. I got to go pick up Julia.
Oh,
I know.
Jeez.
She just texted me. She's ready to come
Julia's
home.
The older one?
No, she's 14.
The older one's still at camp.
Yep, she'll be. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Ava comes back on
right
on Saturday, and Julia.
Well, let's hope the conversion therapy takes.
Oh boy, fingers crossed, buddy. It has been hard, but I think she finally has become an archer. By the way, what were you talking about? She's learning bow hunting.
Sure.
What conversion?
She can go on Rogan. She can go elk hunting with Rogan. Full circle. We brought it all the way back.
Just conversion. So mean. So mean. That idea. Thank you as always. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. It's been too long, and we'll catch up soon.
And I still have your Patagonia hat, so I have to see you in person one of these days.
We'll make a point of that. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, what did I tell you? J.L. Cauvin, how about it? Never let you down. Always delivers. Love talking to him. I hope that you'll let him know that you heard him here on this show, and go and check out his shows, Making Podcasts Great Again, as well as Righteous Prick, and all of his stand-up, jlcauvin.com for more. Love that guy. Okay, that's all I've got for you on today's show. Kirk Wallace Johnson, J.L. Cauvin, and my announcement that I'm taking a little time off. Thank you so much for your support. I'm so scared to go away and leave you and not be doing the work, but I hope you'll be there when I get back. And I'll keep you updated, so check social media, and I might even be reaching out to some of you to talk about what's next and how to develop and grow the program that we do each and every day. So look for that as well. And if you want to talk, reach out to me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Oh, and one more thing. It was great to see John Carroll last night at the Hangout, and we talked about everybody getting together, doing a stand-up with Pete Dominic get-together, and I just think that John should be kind of the headliner and performer, and all of the rest of the musicians and artists that are part of this community can probably play sets with him, but we talked about it last night. It was a pretty good talk, so we're moving forward with The Gathering, headlined hopefully by John Carroll, who's taking us out right now. I love you guys. Be the change you want to see in the world. Bye-bye.
Stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. Tis the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and hear